this tournament is scheduled and we have to live with it. So, and the interesting part is the commentators employed for this particular tournament, who are themselves indisciplined, uncouth, untrained, uncivilized, because they get too much into the depths of this tournament. Of course, the excitement is the two new teams being added, which does baffle me a bit that how will the addition of two new teams make a difference in the longish run? And that's something you will have to find out once the tournament starts. It happens every year. As I've said in my previous episodes and my previous writing, that if you have read them or heard them, this is just like extra pocket money. The question of whether players should play for their country has been going for decades. The example being where South African players, instead of appearing to play for their country, will prefer to play this tournament because it's all about the paycheck. The paycheck is more, the exposure is more, and then they are not under that kind of pressure they are under when it comes to playing for their country. But that debate never goes away. It's been there as far as the football tournaments are concerned. We judge a player in football by how they perform for their respective domestic teams or their clubs rather than how they play for their country, because the domestic tournaments happen every year, the World Cups happen every 4 years, and then World Cups don't give that kind of breathing space to the players, because in a national team you are not the only marquee player, the MVP. You have 12, 13 of them. In a domestic team, you could be one of or the only marquee player. All the focus will be on you. So you will be under pressure, yet your action will affect how the tournament is played. But don't be surprised, because when the tournament starts at 7:30 p.m., don't expect it to finish before 11:30 p.m. That is exclusive of the post-match discussion, which no one really bothers about. So it will take around 100 minutes to finish one innings, then a 10-minute break, and then expect the next one to go till 11 p.m. Ideally, the match should be over at 10:30 p.m., but one hardly bothers about that, and that's the interesting part. And with two new teams added, with the tournament being for exactly 60 days, that's going to make it even more interesting. Late nights is acceptable. And despite the conversations around over rates, finishing on time, half the individuals don't even understand why the over rate is not adhered to, because a lot of time is wasted in unnecessary things which are not important to be discussed at this point in time. But let's get into the depths of this particular tournament. Let's look at the 10 teams associated with this tournament. 8 teams are already popular. And then, of course, with the auction tamasha happening a month ago, and which team picking up which player, which team drafting in which player, and a few players moving on to other teams because they want to be the MVP of that team and not be in charge. So a lot of players moved on to other teams because they thought they did not have a good relationship with the management, or the management chose to move on from them because they were not able to perform. Of course, 10 teams, all of them want to win. Expect each team to play at least 2 matches, that is 18 matches each. Of course, there's a certain format, but let's presume that each team plays around 16 to 17 matches. And the focus is that the new teams will be in focus, because despite having players who have already performed, will they be able to gel for that small amount of time. 60 days is not enough to do with no one individual. It doesn't matter who your coach is, who your mentor is, whom you have recruited, because it really doesn't make a difference. In fact, it makes no difference which players have been selected. Do they have the right picks? Do they have the right set of all-rounders, fast bowlers, openers? Because the auction is such a thing that when you let players go and then you pick them up again, you can only choose a certain number for your team. So those who are left out, they are left out. Those who have gone to other teams, they have gone to other teams. And as I said before, there is no loyalty, because you move on. Okay, you play for a certain team for some time. Some individuals stay on with certain teams for a longish period, or because they are the MVP, or because they have a certain influence with the team management. But overall, players move on. So from teams like Madras Super Giants to Gujarat Indians to Bombay Knight Riders, Calcutta Kings, Rajasthan Titans, Delhi Royals, Hyderabad Capitals, Sunrisers Bangalore, Punjab Capitals, Hyderabad Kings, Sunrisers Bangalore, Punjab Capitals, and Lucknow Super Kings. These are the teams associated with Lucknow and Gujarat as new teams. But this is not for the first time that two new teams have been inducted. It happened a couple of years ago. So there were only 8 teams, but 2 teams were suspended due to indisciplinary reasons. And in 2011, there were 2 teams in Kochi and Pune. So it's not for the first time that we see 2 new teams. It's going to be a very interesting situation. Let's look at who is captaining which team. Madras Super Giants is being captained by one person in Dhoni. Gujarat Indians has been given to Hardik Pandya, who moved on from Bombay Knight Riders because they could only have few players who could be retained and others had to be once again picked up in the draft, and whatever relationship you had. So Hardik Pandya gets the captaincy of Gujarat Indians. Ironically, his home state, Bombay Knight Riders, once again one individual is at the helm in Rohit Sharma. Calcutta Kings, the team which doesn't seem to have a stable base of captains this time. If it was Dinesh Karthik for a while, they gave it to Owen Morgan because they were influenced by the fact that someone like Owen Morgan had won championships for his country. So, but this time they gave it to Shreyas Iyer, who had to move on from Delhi because the captaincy of the Delhi team was given to someone else, and you cannot have 2 individuals who want to be the captain in the same team. You cannot have, as the phrase goes, ek म्यान में 2 तलवार नहीं हो सकती. In this case, that's the same story. Rajasthan, once again, maybe a new captain. As I said, players move on. Who will be the captain? That's the question we all will be wondering about for the rest of our lives. Who will be the captain? I don't know. Delhi, Rishabh Pant has been given the captaincy. Hyderabad, once again between Kane Williamson and someone else. Bangalore, the captaincy has been given to Faf du Plessis, which is very interesting because I would have given it to a younger player. Even if that younger player did not have any experience, I would have given it to maybe a 24 or 25-year-old, because then you would see him as a long-term prospect. Though in these tournaments, what is a long-term prospect, what is a short-term prospect is something which is wondrous. Punjab, it's been given to a new individual. As I said, Rahul moved on from Punjab and was given the captaincy of Lucknow. So they gave the captaincy of Punjab to the next best player in Mayank Agarwal, which is another interesting situation. But does it matter? Because that's the best you can do in terms of captaincy. It doesn't impress me who the captain is, because if they don't win the tournament or they don't reach the semi-finals and the knockout stages, it won't make a difference, because only 2 teams can eventually reach the finals. The other 8 teams will be proving their effort, which team can win, of course, you focus on the 8 teams who have already performed over the past 15 years, or you look at the 2 new teams who might be spoilers because despite the fact that they are new teams, they have individuals who have already performed for other teams. So will there be loyalty? Will Hardik Pandya, who spent 10 years with Bombay, now is playing for Gujarat, will there be any loyalty with him? No, there won't be any loyalty. As I said, these tournaments are not based on loyalty. Neither the coaches, nor the captain, nor the team management care. All they care about is winning and, of course, getting more and more paychecks in their kitty. Because if they've spent a certain amount on the players and on the overall development of the team, they want it to eventually come to a situation where they can go on to win the tournament. But whether it's Madras or Chennai or Gujarat or Bombay or Calcutta or Rajasthan or Delhi or Hyderabad or Bangalore or Punjab or Lucknow, at this point, I have no idea which team has a chance because it's difficult to know. 70 games, over 70 games to be played. Expect indiscipline to be an important part of this tournament with 4 minutes of timeout each, which is going to influence. And then, of course, this tournament always had its skeptics. This tournament is seen as, why is it there? As I've said before, this is not the only national T20 Cup. It may get all the accolades, it may get all the coverage, all the media influence because it's an Indian tournament. It will get that kind of coverage. And then when we recruit players from other tournaments who have performed for them, the question always becomes, just because certain players have performed for other teams, will they be able to perform for this particular tournament because this tournament is the toughest competition? I do not agree with that. It has nothing to do with being tough. For example, if they have recruited a Tim David who has played for numerous teams all around the world, how his recruitment will be questioned if he doesn't perform, if he doesn't make a 40 or a 15 every game, or if he's coming in the last few overs, he hits 10 or 5 balls. Then the question will be, just because he did well for the other tournaments and other teams, he has not been able to repeat that performance for this tournament. Because performance in this tournament will put you at a higher pedestal than performing for other tournaments because of the coverage, because of all the hype surrounding it. So whether it's Madras or Adelaide or Bombay or Brisbane, that's something we will never know anything about. So which of these 10 teams has a chance? Well, I don't have a favorite team. I don't think having a favorite team in such situation even makes a difference. And of course, double headers are the way to go about with such tournaments. It will be interesting how this tournament goes. 2 new teams, everyone is excited. And then of course, how will the captaincy make a difference? Well, they question the team if teams like Gujarat and Lucknow don't reach a knockout stage. Will they say making a Hardik Pandya and a Rahul the captain hasn't made any difference to the performance of the team? But it's a matter of luck. You have 8 teams who are experienced. You have 2 teams who are new in terms of not new in terms of the players who have performed for them. And as I said, there is no loyalty. So if Rashid Khan has moved on from Hyderabad to a new team, well, he has played for so many teams. For him, his jersey changes every 3 months. He plays for a neighboring country's tournament and he moves on to India. In the end of the year, he plays for the Australian tournament. In the middle of the year, he might play for the Sri Lanka tournament. He plays for a different team every year. So for him, it doesn't matter which team he plays for. There are so many players from outside who play for so many other teams. and then you look at him as Mr. T20 expert or T20 domestic league expert. Rashid Khan is one example. He plays for his country in between, but he just moves on from one team to the other as we move on from one city to the other. Sometimes it's Hyderabad, sometimes it's Lucknow, sometimes it's Adelaide, sometimes it's Peshawar, sometimes it's a team from Sri Lanka, and then at other times it's Afghanistan, and that's how he goes about wearing his trade. That's one example. If Rashid Khan has moved on from Hyderabad Capitals, it really won't make a difference to anyone. But we will judge the teams who have not won the tournament, that is, teams like Delhi, Punjab, who have not won the tournament. Then the two new teams in Gujarat and Lucknow, who are looking to win their maiden tournament. And that is going to be the most interesting and the most pulled, the thing which will pull players most. Of course, the discussion I saw a few days ago was all about fan base. There is no fan base. Just because you wave flags of the team and cheer for the players, that does not make you a fan or a loyal person. You know you are there to take advantage of that situation, and you exactly take advantage of that situation. But the question becomes, which is the best T20 national domestic cup? For me, it will always be Australia. When it comes to time management, they are the best. They finish before time. If you really focus on those things, yes, if it's Australia, you don't have a connection because no Indian player is allowed to play for tournaments outside the country. They have a clause or they have a restriction that Indian players are not allowed to play for other domestic tournaments unless, of course, you know you won't get a chance, so you fly or trade from other countries. Of course, Kunmuk Chand was an example, but he wasn't playing from India, he was playing from some other country. But that's a very minor example. This tournament focuses on the sport and not the glamour of the draft picks. Because tournaments like Australia, South Africa, when they do it, they pick players who are not affected by their popularity. They may pick players who we don't even know exist. A lot of times, they will pick up the most mundane, unpopular, unknown players. Whereas in India, there is some kind of a greed associated with that. We only pick up players who are popular. We will not just pick up anyone because we are opening our paycheck and our hearts at the same time for these players. We are spending so much on them. We are spending time and money on their lodging and accommodation and mundane things like lodging and accommodation. But as I said, in terms of time management and focus on the sport and not on the glamour of the draft picks, Australia will be the top team. So which team has a chance this year? Is it Madras? Is it Gujarat? Is it Bombay? Is it Calcutta? Is it Rajasthan? Is it Delhi? Is it Hyderabad? Is it Bangalore? Is it Punjab? Is it Lucknow? At one time, I can't predict. Whoever wins, good for them. Whoever 9 teams will be unhappy. One team will win. And if whoever wins, we will see it as the next rise of that player. Let's say Delhi goes on to win. That will seal Rishabh Pant's legacy as it did with Rohit Sharma when he won 5 championships, or he and his team won 5 championships for his team. That will seal the deal. Or if one out of Gujarat and Lucknow wins the tournament, we will say, wow, 2 teams fresh off the boat and they go on to win the tournament. Wow, what a performance. A brilliant performance. While these 10 teams grappled for the tournament winners, when we know after 70 games on the 29th of May as 60 days of mismanagement starts 10 days from today, well, that will be something that will be the interesting part. What is happening in the other tournament? Indian women's tournament is blowing hot and cold. They lost to England after being bowled out for 134, which meant that this is how the points table stands. If you look at the points table, the interesting thing is that everyone is saying the Indian women's team chances of going to the knockout, the semi-finals is less. If you look at teams like New Zealand, they have lost 3 matches. Their chances are equally down. If you look at England, they have won 1 out of 4. They have to win their next 3 to even have a chance. That is the most important part. I see New Zealand and England not going through. Bangladesh could surprise everyone by performing up to certain levels. Pakistan as a team, after losing 4, you have no chance. You can seriously say that Indian women's team has a lesser chance than New Zealand and England. England has to win their remaining 3 matches. New Zealand has to win the remaining 2 matches. India is also under a bit of pressure because they have strong teams like Australia, South Africa, and Bangladesh to deal with in this particular tournament. So it's difficult to say. Of course, if we presume that Australia and South Africa, after winning 4 matches, are through to the knockouts, or they have 1 foot in the door for the knockouts, that leaves a shootout between India, New Zealand, West Indies, and I wouldn't even put New Zealand in the shootout. I would put India and Bangladesh as the 2, and maybe up to some extent India, West Indies, and Bangladesh, a shootout between these 3 teams for the next 2 positions. New Zealand can surprise by winning the next 2 games. They will at best have 8 points. If West Indies go on to win 2 of the next 3 games, they will have 8 points. India goes on to win 2 of the next 3 games, they will have 8 points. Bangladesh goes on to win, let's say, 2 or 3 of the next 4 games. They're already winning right now after West Indies were bowled out for 140. So they will be on 4 points at the end of today. They'll be on 4 points, which means England has to win their next 3 games. Pakistan has to win their next 3 games. It's going to be an interesting shootout. I don't see, if you have lost 4 games, how can you be in a chance to win? At best, you will have 6 points. England at best will have 8 points. England, West Indies, New Zealand, and India will have, let's presume, 8 points at the end of the tournament, which makes it difficult for Bangladesh. Even Bangladesh could have 8 points. I presume Pakistan is knocked out. But I see India, New Zealand, West Indies, England, and Bangladesh vying for the number 3 and number 4 slots. All these teams may end up with 8 points, or they may not win their next 2 games. Difficult to predict. But it's a possibility that India, New Zealand, West Indies, England, and Bangladesh may end up with 8 points or more, depending on how the tournament progresses. And then we'll have a shootout through the net ended. Is the most ridiculous thing to qualify a team. But if you're stuck on 8 points, that's the way. Australia may go on to lose their last 3 matches, or they may lose 1 out of their last 3 matches. Then they'll be on 7 games, 5 matches, 1 loss. 7. Australia still will qualify. They have to win 1. South Africa has to win 1. Which means someone like India has to win the last 3 matches. New Zealand has to win the last 3 matches. West Indies has to win the last 3 matches. I find it difficult for England at this point and Pakistan at this point. So England, I'm not seeing them. It will be difficult. They have to win the last 3 matches. It will be a very interesting situation. 5 teams stuck on 8 points, and only 2 can go through with the net run rate coming into the picture. But what happens with tomorrow's game? Even before the game starts, you will read in pseudo media, print media, electronic media, and wherever it's possible that this is a foregone conclusion. You can give Australia 2 points even before the match starts. They're a superior team. India's tournament hasn't been up to the mark. Australia have won all their games with authority and poise, and with good planning. India's planning has been up and down. That's what the pseudo media, print media will reiterate again and again. So we may as well, without having the game, give 2 points to Australia. That's the way things work. Ridiculous, but that's what everyone wants. So this ends episode number 496 on the 18th of March 2022. Stay tuned for the next episode. I will be back with episode number 497 on the 21st of March 2022. So what should you do while you wait for the next episode? You should put these legendary books in your must-read books column. Once again, put these legendary books in your must-read books column.